Hello and welcome everybody, and very welcome to Douglas Shull from the Noble Metals Extraction Systems. And he will talk about industry and science from lunar lava tubes. Show the way to Mars. Have fun and enjoy.
Okay. Good afternoon and good morning to everybody around the world. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Noble Metals Extraction Systems is concerned with operating with mine sites, cleaning them up, and extracting the noble metals, silver, gold, platinum, and also getting rid of the lead and mercury. So that's a big part of what we do. I have been a Mars Society member since 1998. I'm a founding life member, and retired from the Air Force back in 2009, and was at the conference last year. And it's too bad we can't have a conference this year, but it's great that it's virtual like this. I'll go ahead and go through the slides. Okay, here's my overview. My big thing is when we have a lunar base and a Mars base, that they're not just science bases. I want these places to be also wrapped up with industry, because the more industry you have with science, the more the science grows, and they both feed on each other. So I'll be covering I'll just go back to what I talked about last year. I talked about basing in a lunar lava tube and how that module alignment would be, and then carrying on into the industrialization and how we're going to do things. The big goal is to marry telescopes to railroads. Here on Earth, you don't do that. You don't put a telescope in a railroad. That's crazy, because a railroad, you know, as it moves along, it makes a lot of noise. It, you know, moves the telescope around. But on Mars, and especially on the moon, you want to have a telescope in a rail car. You want to specially fit it out and place a telescope in there. One of the big things I noticed when I bought Dr. Zuperman's book last October was on page 252, he talks about placing telescopes on the moon because it's easier to handle in there. They're not in space. They run out of fuel. They don't have fuel. You can adjust them on site. I advocate placing them on rail cars for ease of handling. And on the bottom of my slide there, you can see I've got the great observatories that are in space or going to be in space. You got Spitzer, Hubble, Chandra, and Compton. Here's a little background on the lunar lava tubes. For those who don't know it, lunar lava tubes are areas where, when the moon was volcanically active, you had a lot of volcanic activity, and when that quit, it left areas where there's underground places where the lava had run out, and then they're just empty containers. And what's nice about them is you could put things in them and you're protected from the harsh lunar environment. On the moon, you get radiation, solar storms, micrometeors. Inside that lava tube, you're protected from that. So right here is a map of all the lava tubes, you know, spread across the moon, and here's some close-ups. Last year, I talked about a baseline module arrangement. You'll have an airlock, greenhouse module, habitation module, lab assaying module, and a garage workshop module. So that you'll set up your initial base will be set up in that lunar lava tube so that you can keep the crew safe, keep the people safe, provide food, water, oxygen, that kind of stuff before you begin to venture out from the lunar lava tube from the base. Once you have your initial base set up, you're going to be using in-situ materials. So it's a big thing. On Mars, we're not taking everything with us. We're using the material that's there. Same thing on the moon. You're going to be taking stuff that's there. You're going to be using it for construction. At first, you'll bring complicated things from the Earth, like circuit boards and more complex types of machinery. But the heavy stuff you'll want to be able to build on the moon. When you crack lunar minerals, you get oxygen, usually. So you want to be able to catch that, because you're going to be able to use that to help pressurize your facility. A fully operational lunar lava tube base is going to be producing plumbing, wiring. It's going to be producing rail cars. It's going to be producing railroad track ties. And it will be in eventually to produce pressurized locomotives. A big part of this facility is going to be solar power and nuclear power. It's going to need both kinds of power sources. Solar, so you can bring the nuclear power plant down, but you're going to have nuclear up during the 2-week nighttime. Now, I found these artist concepts for lunar bases. You'll notice that the one has a gentleman, a couple of astronauts on a wheeled vehicle. You see all the tracks all over the place. You see the tracks around the base. Another picture shows, I think that's what it would look like inside of a polar crater. So you're in the extreme cold, and you can get a very good infrared telescope. What you notice about that picture of the one on the left is they're driving around on the moon. They've got lunar dust everywhere. And what I've been told is lunar dust is like glass dust. It gets into everything. And it's really nasty. It's difficult to clean off. And if you don't clean it off really well, eventually things you have that get that on them will begin to degrade and possibly fail. I discovered there's a couple of costs on Earth. There's a telescope system. This is a 1-meter observatory system that you can buy for $500,000. For a railroad, it's $1 million a mile to build rails. So I'm just thinking it's going to cost at least 10, maybe 20 times as much to put that stuff on the moon. I don't have any idea how much it will cost in the end. Initial costs are going to be sunk into building the facility, and we'll just have to see. Here is my railroad track telescope parking. So what you're going to do is you're going to mount the rail car with the telescope. You're going to build telescopes that could be 1 meter, 1.5 meter, 2 meter. It depends on what the customer wants, and then you're just going to sell them. You could lease them or you could sell them. You're going to have a locomotive that's going to take that rail car mounted telescope out to its parking spot. So you can see here on the bottom where I've got the concept set up, you've got a rail, which somehow got out of alignment. But anyway, you've got this rail system here, and you go ahead and park the rail mounted telescope on the siding. It leaves a pathway through so that your rail mounted telescope and locomotive can pull one in. So you can deliver them, park them, and you can just go on and on like this. Left, right, down, south and north. So what this allows you to do is you have the rail mounted telescope here. You're going to hook up power to it, and this is going to sit there, and the people, whoever owns it, they're going to operate it. They're going to sit there, going to operate it and do what they want with it. They may lease time on it, but eventually what will happen is people will buy their own telescopes and they'll lease time on it. So the idea is to get the telescopes up onto these rail cars, and when they begin to malfunction, not a problem. You take the locomotive out, hook it up, take it inside the lunar lava tube into your maintenance facility, and you fix it. So you don't have to have many $100 million, billion-dollar system sitting on the moon. You don't have to have that extra layers of fail-safe that if that one thing fails, your equipment is dead. So you want to be able to have it so that it's simple. And so if you have a problem, pull it in, fix it, bring it back out. That's the advantage of having it on a rail car. Now, the reason why you don't want to drag it out there in just a flat vehicle is because you don't want to spin dust. So the railroad allows you to have this vehicle rolling across a track instead of rolling across the lunar dust and spreading lunar dust everywhere. The initial goal of this whole setup is to manufacture telescopes that you sit on rail cars. These telescopes will exploit the spectrum. The customer will tell the manufacturers on the lunar base what they want, whether they want optical, infrared, ultraviolet, X-ray, whatever they need. What they can't manufacture on the moon, they'll bring from the Earth, place it in the telescope. The next thing is you're going to lease or sell countries, states, universities. I went to the University of Florida. People go to the University of Southern California, Virginia, Georgia, FSU, you name it, wherever you're from. University of Berlin, Madrid, you know, universities across the world. Countries can buy them. States, cities, museums if they want to, individuals. It's unlimited who would want to buy these. Railroads and their associated equipment, rail cars, locomotives, the rail cars, the locomotives, those things will bring the material from the mine sites. They'll bring it into the lunar lava tube facility. They'll make things out of it. That's the big thing. You have science and industry together. So you don't just have a base that sits there and does science work. You have a base that allows you to build things that will make money. And expansion is unlimited. You can build these tracks across the moon. You can continuously build up the parking area. Now, what does this have to do with Mars? This is the Mars Society. You can see I've got the Mars flag behind me. You can also base these from Mars lava tubes. Everything that you do on the moon is complementary to a parallel Mars missions. The lift vehicles that take things to the moon can also take things to Mars. The equipment used on the moon, you can also use on Mars. The materials you use on the moon, you find on the moon to build with, you also have those similar materials that are on Mars. Everything's the same. So when you get to Mars, although you may not have the same kind of people buying telescopes on Mars, maybe you'll have different people that want to buy them. So the telescopes can be set up there to set up large bases on Mars. Again, but you'll have the rail systems for the most rapid transports. I saw the National Geographic series, was a couple of years ago, where they showed people just driving around, and all the years they were there, they never built a railroad. Never built a railroad that went from one base to another base, although they are only a couple miles away. And they showed people getting lost in a dust storm. That's ridiculous. You know, that's on Mars. If you have a railroad track, you're not going to get lost. You'll always find your way home. So you build this facility on the moon because you can build it quicker because it's close. But again, use the same materials from Mars. This is not a base set up so you can then go to Mars from the moon. The moon is its own entity. You build things there. You'll set it up. Shows you how to do it on Mars. You'll do it on Mars. And so like Dr. Zubrin says, like we all say, on to Mars. I always like this guy from Lord of the Rings. That ends my presentation. Are there any questions?
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. We're going to start opening up the Q&A portion. We have one question so far. What is the advantage of moving a telescope on the moon?
Okay, well, you know you've got the telescopes in space. And the space telescopes cost hundreds of millions of dollars to $1 billion. And they're excellent pieces of machinery. With them on the moon, though, you don't have to worry about the rocket packs. You don't have to worry about stabilization systems. All those things you're not needing anymore. You're not needing the rockets, the thrusters to maintain its attitude. It can sit in that rail car, and it can be moving around electrically, pointing to what it needs to point to. So that's the big advantage of having it on the moon. Now, I'm not advocating building an entire telescope and flying it to the moon, because you could easily damage it. What I'm advocating is building the shell materials on the moon, and then the more expensive things, like maybe the mirror at first, the electronics, they get shipped there. Later, though, you want to be able to construct the mirrors on the moon itself, and only have the most complicated electronics and circuitry coming from the Earth. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, thank you.
We have another question that asks if maglev would be more efficient on the moon than railroads.
It might be. What I'm going for, though, is simplicity at first. So I want the simplest possible system. Because the moon only has 1/6 gravity, a rail car will move with more ease over the rails on the lunar surface. So yes, maglev would work. I think it would work perfectly on the moon. And that could be something you build later. What I go for is the simplest thing. So you have inflatable structures set up inside the lunar lava tube itself. These are simple structures. They don't involve a lot of construction. You don't want to have putting regolith bags over top of vehicles. You want to just have them set inside and out of the way. So yeah, maglev would be great. It will come later, but I think it would be great.
And we had another question. What does a low gravity railroad system look like?
Well, it'll be the same as on Earth, only, and I didn't say this in slides, I would advocate one that's 2 meters in width instead of the 4'8" we have here in a lot of parts of the Earth. So a wider bodied railroad. Otherwise, everything would be pretty much the same. You'll still have the same kind of wheels and chassis and brake systems. Train is very mechanical. Not a lot of electronics in it, but you can put those in. It'll be much easier to move. It'd be basically the same as on the Earth. You could build, of course, out of lighter materials because of the 1/6 gravity. I think rails would be the answer to any kind of moving of heavy materials around the surface of the moon, especially around the base, the mine sites, and pushing out these telescopes.
We have another question about how you would plan to start to action this as any precursor to a mission.
Well, first, I've seen a lot of artist concepts of the bases sitting out on the surface, and I've heard a lot of people have advocated how important lunar lava tubes are as far as putting a base inside there and making it easy. So making it a lot easier and safer. The main thing is you've got the crew, the people have to be safe. That's the primary thing. If the people aren't safe, it doesn't matter what you make. You can't constantly sit on the surface of the moon in small spaceships and be exposed to radiation and micrometeor strikes. And also a larger meteor can hit the moon and could damage or destroy things. So as long as you're more protected inside these lava tubes, they've been there for billions of years. So they've stood up to impacts. Yes, some are collapsed, but they're still there. So I would work with the people in the Mars Society. Also, I work with my local congressman, talk to him about the space program. I'm here in the Brevard County, Indian River County, Florida. We've got Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, Kennedy Space Center. So our local congressman is very attuned to space. And I've been giving him these briefings, showing him this concept.
Another question asks, have you looked into where on the lunar surface you'd propose to go? Access to LLTs might be challenging, and the connection between the tube interior and the surface instrument array may be challenging.
Yes, absolutely. That's a really good question. What it would be is you're looking for a lunar lava tube that has more of a horizontal entry. So like when you go into a garage or a warehouse, there are a lot of lunar lava tubes that you can see that have vertical entrances where you drop down into them. These would be very difficult to work with, especially in spacesuits. So you're going to look for one that's maybe it's been hit by a meteor in the past and it's kind of opened up, so you can just kind of drive down into it or drive into it horizontally rather than lowering yourself down into a tube. That would be the kind of lava tube that I think would be the best, kind of a horizontal exit. They've got them in Hawaii. I've seen pictures in Hawaii where you have lava tubes, you just walk into them and you go back. Those are on the moon also. We just have to look for them and find them. Those would be the best kind, because you're absolutely right. When you've got cabling and power systems, you want to be able to make everything as easy as possible. And if you're trying to pull stuff up out of a vertical tube, that's not what you want. Now, that vertical tube will make a great skylight. That'd be perfect for that. But otherwise, it's not the best thing to start out in.
Okay, are there any more questions that people have if they want to pop into the call?
Hi, this is Jen Blank, and I had a question.
Yes.
Wasn't answered about that. I was the one who asked about accessing the lava tubes. That is, what's the connection between the lava tubes and having your rail telescope instrument base on the moon? I mean,
Okay.
it seems as though it's not a requirement that you have a lava tube habitat except for protection, but you could have other habitat targets.
You could, except the other habitats you'll have to do a lot of construction to protect the people in the beginning. So if you place say you place an inflatable on the moon and you set it out on the surface, you're going to have to cover that up with material to protect the people inside.
Right.
Also, and you know that the temperature on the moon swings radically. Between the heat of the day, it can be 125 degrees centigrade, and at night it drops to 175 below centigrade. So the temperature swing is 300 degrees centigrade. So when you're out on the surface, you're exposed to that. The lunar lava tubes, they've calculated that the average temperature inside the LLTs down in the equatorial area of the moon, if you can find one there, is 25 below centigrade. It stays like that all the time. So you don't have a vast temperature swing.
Cool. No, I mean, I'm looking for reasons to argue for a lunar,
All right.
a lunar tube habitat. And I mean, I'm thinking about, I'm asking the question, thinking about the ESA model for that lunar base or moon base, where they essentially use the regolith to cover their, whatever their lander module or whatever, right?
Right, right. I mean, that's what they'd have to do if they're not in two.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can do that, except construction in environments like that is dangerous. Like just like construction in the Antarctic is dangerous, or when I was in the Arctic, I was at Thule Air Base. Construction there is dangerous because of you can have the extreme cold and the nasty environmental conditions. The moon's the same. I mean, you got people. You're in spacesuits. You know, if you have something happen, you're in a vacuum. So
well,
the
and
less
also potentially, yeah, I think about
go ahead.
I think about the moon or the lunar lava tubes too, and how we think that they're much larger.
Yes,
You could
absolutely.
start out with a small, a small inflatable hab or something, and then expand that to something much bigger and more exciting.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I was thinking about the Robert Heinlein short story about the people flying. There's a really kind of a corny story called the Menace from Earth. Anyway, it's a teenage science fiction book, but it involves like essentially flying in the air ducts for the lunar colony.
Yes, yeah.
Really awesome. I don't know if you read that story. But
now I've seen that. Well, there's possibilities that there are large areas down inside the moon where like there's like large, huge bubbles they think that could be like miles across. I mean, this would be, further in the future, not the initial, but if you went back into a lava tube and discovered something like that, you could just figure out if you could block off all the ends and pressurize it. That would be like, incredible. But yeah, that would be later. Yeah, you'd absolutely want to do that. Then you build the rails inside into that, so you can travel.
Well, that was my next question actually, was do you envision what kind of timeline do you think, or time it would take to essentially make an instrument operational? And do you envision building something like on a I don't know, like a cargo launch, or it's like a space station, and then bring that to the moon? Or do you actually imagine having a tube habitat first and doing the construction inside the tube?
Yeah, I would have the tube set up with your airlock module, greenhouse hab module, garage module, lab assay module. Have those 5 things first, because now you've got the crew protected. You're generating oxygen. You're cleaning water. You're growing a little bit of food for yourself, and you get that set up first, and then you go from there and you begin to explore, bring in the materials. You could bring stuff from Earth, a little more complicated. I mean, I just like the idea of the habs. I think it's like, was it Bigelow? He has the inflatables. I just think they're so easy to manipulate. I mean, you can bring it down, you can move it in and inflate it, or inflate it and move it, however you want to do it, and then just connect them up. And anything else would be a lot heavier and more difficult to maneuver and to manipulate. But you could always later build structures on the moon. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, I was just saying, yeah, thanks. And I don't mean to be hogging the question.
No, not a problem.
But I sent you an email, Doug, just to introduce myself. I wonder, do you or does anybody else on this channel know, is there, because I'm doing analog robotic work for a distant future Mars mission to a lava cave. But
Yes.
and we, and in some of our arguments, we've used data from something called the Candidate Cave catalog, and that's where they've used machine learning to look at orbital data to essentially tag potential cave entrances, whether it's a skylight or a breakdown or something.
Right.
Does anyone know, is there a comparable catalog for lunar lava caves?
I've looked for it and tried to find it. That one map I had at the very beginning. Let me see, at the very beginning I had, oops, I'm going the wrong way. Where is it? This one right here, it talked about all these lunar lava tube sites, and then this one had the close-ups.
Where did you get the data for that first, that color of the dot picture?
I picked that off the internet. I can't remember exactly where I got it.
Okay, I might ask you an email, but that's really cool. Yeah, because it'd just be really interesting to, well, and I see most of the ones we see are skylights, right? So
right. Well, they're the easiest.
Argument we get, right? We're using the,
I don't know if you can see it now, but you see these on the bottom. Now it looked like this one looks like one that would be more horizontal entry. So it looks like you could drive down into it and then you go in. That would be, if that's what it is. I'm not exactly sure what I'm seeing here on this one, but that would be the ideal. Now this one, I've heard this one's that's like 100 meters to the bottom.
Yeah, I know in some of them we've been able to say it's, I can't remember, between 50 and 150 meters down to what looks like it could, and that could be, super, super poorly consolidated regolith there, we don't know.
Right, yeah, I mean, you have to, and your robots would be the perfect thing to explore these because they could ping everything with radar or spectroscopy or what do you call it?
Well, I'm working with a group from JPL, and we're just starting to use the Boston Dynamics Spot robots.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, they're so cool. And I mean, we started out with the initial wheeled robot and using it essentially as a platform for instruments, and now we're using Spot, and Spot can walk into the caves. It's pretty cool.
Yes, I mean, FPL here uses those little robot dogs.
Yeah, yeah.
And the Army's been using they're called, they're like robot mules. Or they put packs on them.
So anyway, I'm sorry to jump in here, everybody, but I'm doing the science part and working with the robotics part, and I'd love just to know who else is in this community focusing on the cave, whatever lava tube.
Oh, I am. I just put it on my headphones.
Sorry, Ron, are you and someone else doing that? I actually tried to search for people in the Mars Society, whatever, who's here, and I didn't find anybody that way. So anyway, anyways, thank you, Doug.
Hey, no, thank you. I'll look forward to your email. I have to go leave later, but I'm going to come back to it. I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't know if I can do anything.
Got
I just had a quick question.
Please.
In the overall plan that you've got to create habitats within the lava tubes, is there anything that you're going to be doing that's specific towards combating the psychological effects of humans becoming subterranean?
No, that's a great question, especially, people who come from mining backgrounds. Well, I mean, you'll have to, the big reason why you want to have the greenhouse connected to the habitation module is because not just for keeping people alive, providing oxygen, the initial oxygen source and cleaning the water, but also for a place you can walk into and enjoy the light and the greenery so you don't feel like you're underground. You're right, that's a problem on the moon. You have to be either under some kind of cover or you have to be inside something so you're not getting hit by the radiation. It's not, it's not like here on Earth where, you sit outside, you enjoy the sunlight. Of course, you're still getting irradiated somewhat, but not like you are on the moon. So, yeah, that would be something. But I mean, you're constantly going to be going out on missions. So you're not going to be stuck there, except maybe during the heat of the day when the temperature out on the surface, gets past, probably 60 to 70 degrees centigrade. So there'd be a few days during daytime, around the lunar noon, a few days on either side where you really can't go outside because it's just going to get super hot. But yeah, that's a great question. That would,
very much answer.
Yeah.
Sorry, we just about have to wrap up the call, but if you guys want to keep talking about lava tubes or try to find a community with that, you guys are more than welcome to start a chat in the Slack channel. and you guys can keep the conversation going.
Okay.
Shull, it has been great to have you.
Hey, thank you, Danielle.
Coming
Appreciate
and
it.
speaking with us.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you very much for your help.
so much for everyone for being here.
Yeah, you guys are great putting this all together, man. I wouldn't know how to do it, so thank you. Thank you, everybody, for that listen and ask questions. I do appreciate that.
Thank you all.
All right, goodbye.